and begin to awaken to a new level, to a whole new level of experience. You'll see it this way. The first thing you'll notice is a tendency to think and act spontaneously, rather than on fears based on your past experiences. In other words, you begin to trust and surrender and to have a sense of spontaneity about your life. And you're not always focused on whether it's going to work out or not going to work out, and be afraid if it doesn't. And those thoughts are you're no longer wanting those thoughts to expand in your life. And then you'll notice an unmistakable ability to enjoy each moment of your life. Every moment becomes an exquisite part of your existence. And you'll find yourself, even in times when you used to think of them as boring or routine, like, maybe getting at an airport and being delayed for a couple of hours, you begin to find an unmistakable ability to enjoy that, and to not judge it, and to see it for what it is, and to even be grateful for it, that you're not getting on a plane that wasn't supposed to leave at that time. You begin to see it that way. And you begin to enjoy the little things that we so take for granted, and the quiet times, and even driving back and forth to work, or you find yourself having this unmistakable new ability to enjoy every moment that you find in your life and to treat it all as a gift. It's a sign of the awakened life. You also find that you're developing a loss of interest in judging other people. You're off of judgment. You're moving beyond that. You understand the truth and the notion that you don't define other people with your judgments. You define yourself as someone who needs to judge. That each one of us is defined by our own thoughts and our own actions. And even those people who are behaving in ways that are antisocial and that are criminal and so on, you find yourself less judging them and more seeing them for what they are. Not saying that they shouldn't be held accountable and responsible, of course. But that judgment, that inner hostility, that inner anger toward them is replaced by a sense of wondering, how could that little baby at one time who was in its mother's arms turn out this way? What created that? And I wonder if there's anything I can do to help eliminate that in other children, rather than the judgment. You find a loss of interest in interpreting the actions of other people. You don't become this great interpreter for what everybody is and what everybody is doing. The awakened life beckons you to just sort of observe it, to note it. And even in your own behavior, you become less inclined to interpret it and more inclined to say that this is just an indication of where I am or where I am not at this particular moment. And with no need to analyze it, you begin to see how everything fits together. Rather than analyzing every little bit of life and interpreting everything for people, you try to do less of that and more of seeing how we all fit together. The awakened life means a loss of confrontation. You're no longer interested in it. It just isn't important to you. It's like having to prove yourself and make a contest out of everything. It's just no longer there for you. The real sense of the awakened life behind that is that you don't have to make anybody else wrong. And you don't have to make yourself right. That's the real sense of awakening, when you begin to know that there's much more to life than making a contest out of it. I noticed that when my little boy, who's 2 years old, goes out to play, any place, the only reason that he does it is for fun. I mean, he doesn't try to win, he doesn't try to beat anybody, he doesn't try to confront anybody. He just goes out to play. And we lose that in the name of confrontation and conflict. You begin to develop that sense that inside every one of us is a little 2-year-old who wants to come out and play and doesn't have to win and doesn't have to beat anybody and doesn't have to be in conflict or confrontation. That little child inside of you begins to surface when you start awakening. You lose the ability to worry. I didn't say you lose worry, you lose the ability to worry. It's no longer part of you. You begin to understand the absurdity of worry. You begin to see that it makes no sense to worry about the things that you have no control over. Because if you have no control over them, it makes no sense to worry about them. And then it makes no sense to worry about the things that you do have control over. Because if you got control over them, it makes no sense to worry about them. And there goes everything that you ever worried about. You either have control or you don't. And if you don't, you move on. And if you do, you take control. As you awaken, you lose that ability to just worry about things and instead accept them. You'll notice frequent, overwhelming episodes of appreciation, as she puts it. Frequent, overwhelming episodes of appreciation. Appreciating everything, being thankful. It's one of the great ways to become awakened in your life, is to be thankful for everything and to give thanks for it. Appreciate getting on a plane and having it take off and having it land and having a seat and having someone to serve you a drink and being able to wear clothes and everything about your life. And as you become more aware of how much you have and how much you have to be grateful for, you become less focused on scarcity and what you don't have, because your mind is focused on what you do have. And when your mind is focused on what you do have expands. You begin to develop contented feelings of connectedness with others and with nature. You begin to see that every human being that you meet any place on the planet shares being human with you and what it feels like to be human. You begin to see that there's a oneness to it all, that there's a universal mind, that you're a part of it. And you know that each one of us is connected and that on a round planet we can't choose up sides. That you begin to know that, then you treat the people that you come into contact with the same sense of reverence that you have for yourself, because you are, in fact, that person. It's why Jesus said on the cross when the spear was thrown into him, "Forgive him, Father, for he knows not what he does." The reason he knows not what he does, he doesn't know that he's throwing a spear into himself. Because every time you hurt another human being, you hurt the generic human being. You hurt all of us. And every time you send out love, you create a sense of harmony in that being. You begin to have what she called frequent attacks of smiling. You become more joyous, more merry, more contented as you awaken and get beyond all of this need to accumulate and perform and achieve, which is all wonderful. But when you go beyond it, you begin to develop an increased susceptibility to the love extended by others, as well as the uncontrollable urge to extend it to others. Love becomes what you are, and you can't give away what you don't have, and you can only give away what you do have. And if what you have is love, then that's what you find yourself giving away. Those are the symptoms, the signs of awakening. It seems to me that I have always known this, and that I came into this world knowing that you become what you think about, whether you want it or not. I was really very blessed. I lived in an orphanage until I was 10, in a series of foster homes, with my older brother, but he was sick quite a bit. He was very anemic, and I used to have to help him as a young boy. He was 16 months older than I was, and this was when I was 4, 5, 6, and 7, and so on. I can remember whenever a new child would come to the house, they would always say, "Go find Wayne." And I would be out in the back. They had orchards there, and this was no hardship. This was no difficult thing for me. This was a great blessing, I think, in my life. Those earliest days. And I can remember a girl named Martha came, and they were dropping her off for basically the same reasons that we were dropped off there. And they said, "Go find Wayne." And I came and I started talking to Martha, and she was crying, and she was all upset, and she was sad, and I was trying to convince her that she didn't have to be sad, that this was, and I remember saying to her, "This is a great place. There's no parents here. You can do pretty much anything that you want. I mean, you've got a lot of freedom, and we're going to have a great time." And I can remember being in school, at the public school. It was a numbered school. They didn't even name them in that day. It was PS number 127. And one time, we were out on the playground, and all the kids were all upset. And I said, "What's wrong?" And they said, "Well, the teacher said this is the worst class that she ever had." And she was so all upset, and she was angry, and she was hurt. And I said, "Well, why would you allow her opinions to have anything to, if this is her hardest day, then her life is just easy." And I can remember talking to other people about all you have to do is change the way you think. And it goes from being a miserable experience or a tough experience or a hard experience to one that you can do anything that you want with. And when my mother got our family all back together again when I was nine, almost 10 years old. And I can remember her telling me what it was like when I was just a baby, when I was just like an infant, that I was the one child that could make everybody else laugh at times when everybody else would. She said we were waiting for a bus one time when we were just real babies before I went into the orphanage, and she said a car came by, and it was in Detroit, and there was all this slush, and we all went flying down. Everybody had dirt on them and dirty snow, and we were laying in the ground, and everybody was crying. And she said, you were and upset and mad because our clothes were wet and so on. And she said, you just stood up and said, this is great, isn't this wonderful? Look, we don't have to do this, and we don't, just turning it into something positive. It's like, so the ability to be able to do that was something. I can't remember a time in my life when I didn't know that if I really went to work on how I thought, that things just didn't have to be bad. I was the richest kid in the orphanage. I've talked about that many times in my lectures. That a snowstorm was a time we had two snow shovels at the home, and one of them had the edges all curled up from hitting the curbs, and you couldn't make any money with that one. So the other one, when it would snow, I would go downstairs and I would take the good snow shovel and I would put it under my bed, and I'd sleep with it right with me in the bed so that nobody else would get it. And I would get up before everybody else got up, and I would go out and I would just shovel everybody else's snow, shovel their walk. And then later on, and I'd just go knock on the door and just tell them that I shoveled their walk. And some would say thank you, and some would give me a dime, which doesn't sound like much, but that's about $3,000 in today's money. And when I found out that soda pop bottles, for example, were worth 2 cents each, that if you took them back, you could get 2 cents back, that was just like one of the great awarenesses and awakenings of my life, because I would follow people around who were drinking a Coca-Cola and say, you almost done with that? They said, well, no, I'm not going. Well, just whenever you're ready. I just follow them and then we'll walk until, and we had a coal bin where we lived because it was coal furnaces, and we filled that coal bin with soda pop bottles, and I would take it back. It was just always easy to change, and all the other kids would be not having any money and complaining about not being able to have abundance or be able to have some level of being able to buy themselves like just a little donut or a Pepsi Cola or something. They couldn't figure it out. And it always seemed so easy to me that all you had to do was just look around and see the opportunities in anything. And it had nothing to do with whether there are opportunities there. There always are opportunities. I'm 67 years old. I have never, ever been unemployed or can't even deal with the concept of unemployment. It isn't that I've had no job. I've always had more jobs than and it isn't because I've been through all good economic times. There've been some pretty sour economic times over the last 50 years or so. I just have never known how to think any other way than, if you change the way you think about things, you can create whatever it is you want for yourself in your life. It's just a simple knowing. I mean, I've made a living talking about it. I've written lots of books about it and so on, but I have always lived it and practiced it, and I still do today.
What has come to become really clear to me in the last few years of my life is that there really are two selves within each and every one of us. Muktananda called the ego, the part of us that has edged God out, ego, edged God out, the false self. And the false self is this part of us that is not authentic. It is the ego. This false self is the part of us that is always trying to win, trying to own things, trying to prove itself. We send our kids off to school and we tell them, be ahead of everybody else, win, no matter what, and so on. And they have a tendency to believe that who they are these bodies, even though the body they're in is going to change and you'll never be able to find it again. And then there's within each and every one of us a higher self. And this higher self is really the soul. It's really the spirit. It's really God. But these two selves are sort of constantly they're not at war so much with each other, but there's there's this battleground that we have within us. I'll give you an example of it in my own life. Somebody on the internet, a guy named Watkins, has put out a list, because there's lists for everything. The 100 most spiritually influential people alive. And they put out this list, 100 people. And they rank from number 1 to 100. And I'm on the list. I'm one of the, thank you. Not only am I on the list, but I am, according to this list, and they've got all this criteria of how you get on this list, I am the 3rd most spiritually influential person alive. How about that, huh? So the spiritual part of myself, my soul, the higher place within myself, says to me, this is not relevant. You're not any better than anybody else just because somebody has put you on a list. In fact, you shouldn't even know about that list. And perhaps the people who are most spiritually influential aren't even on that list and don't even want to be on that list because they don't care about those kind of rankings and comparisons and so on. But then there's the ego over here that says, what do you mean number 3? Well, what's going on with that? And who are these people who are more spiritually influential than you? And how are you going to take them down? So there's this sort of constant thing about it shouldn't make any difference. Who I am is the same as everyone else. We all come from the same place, and we all return back to the same place. But then the ego says, let's see, the 2 people ahead of me on this list, one of them is Eckhart Tolle, but he had Oprah. And she's only number 8 on the list anyway. And he got on there every week, and that's not fair. So, and then there's the Dalai Lama. And I figure Eckhart and I maybe can get together and take the Dalai Lama out of this thing. Or maybe I should align with the Dalai Lama. And anyway, the ego is doing this number on us. But there's also the part of us that is divine. And this is the place that I'm addressing here in this program. There's a quote from Joel Goldsmith. Joel wrote so many great books. A Parenthesis in Eternity was one of them. And this is what Joel said. He said, then there are those who reach a stage in which they realize the futility of this constant striving and struggling for the things that perish, things which after they are obtained prove to be shadows. It is at this stage that some persons turn from this seeking for things in the outer realm to a seeking for them from God. And that's who you tuned into today on this program. I have left this pursuing things and money and fame and winning and being better than others. It's taken me a while, but it has been a powerful journey. As a matter of fact, I had said to my ex-wife, I said, can you imagine? Did you ever in your wildest dreams, could you ever have imagined that you would be married to the 3rd most spiritually influential person alive? And she said, they didn't call me when they made that list. And she said also, I don't want to upset you, dear, but you're not in my wildest dreams. I said, well, all right. So moving to this higher place is really understanding that in the 2nd chapter of Wishes Fulfilled, I call it the higher self. And it gets defined very specifically by this great Bulgarian teacher. His name was Omram Mikhail Ivanov. and he was teaching what's called the initiatic sciences. And I have had his teachings show up in my life in a very powerful way. I've studied his writing. I've listened to many of his recorded lectures that took place back in the 50s and 60s and 70s. And I brought a quote of his that I'd like to share with you. Our higher self is perfect, omniscient, and almighty, a fragment of God himself, a pure, transparent, luminous quintessence. I love that. I love great writing like that. And that within each and every one of us, there is a place inside of each and every one of us that is all-knowing, that is almighty, that is actually a fragment of God. He then went on to say, the Creator has planted within every creature a fragment of himself, a spark, a spirit of the same nature of himself. And thanks to this spirit, every creature can become a creator. And this means that instead of always waiting for their needs to be satisfied by some external source, human beings can absolutely work inwardly by means of their own thoughts, their own will, and their own spirit to obtain nourishing, healing elements that they need. This is why he said to all of us, the teaching I bring to you is of the Spirit of the Creator and not of matter. A spark that is in each and every one of us.
Spiritual is a way of being. It is a lesson that most people haven't learned because we think of things as religious as being spiritual. To be spiritual to me means to be connected to the source from which all things emanate. And that doesn't just mean that you go around and do things in a positive, religious, nice way. It means that you are spiritually connected on a vibrational level. So that if you look at the source from which all things come, and if you had magical binoculars that you could just sort of tune into and see what it looks like and what it feels like and what it sounds like. What it sounds like this. It says, this source says, I am the source of all material and spiritual worlds. Everything emanates from me. What it looks like love, it looks like kindness, and mostly it excludes no one and no thing. And so when you have an organization or a thought that excludes some and includes others, which is what almost all organized religion does, it really deviates from the source energy that I'm speaking about here, because source energy and spiritual are the same. So that every thought that we have that says, I get it but you don't, I'm better than you are, I'm number one and you're number two, you live on that side of the river, I live on this side of the river, therefore I am entitled to something and you're not. Anything that excludes is non-spiritual. So all we have to do is think, one of the great teachers in India many, many years ago, around the time of Christ, even before, was a man named Patanjali. And he said these words about spirituality. He said, when you are steadfast in your abstention of thoughts of harm directed toward yourself or others, all living creatures will cease to feel fear in your presence. So all you have to do is be steadfast. That's what the great spiritual masters all gave us. It's like when people ask me, well, are you a spiritual man? I say, I fluctuate. There are times when I just am the most giving and loving and creative and kind and focused on God, human being as I can be. But there are other times when I lose it. There are times when I get frustrated. There are times when I possibly think of myself as, having accomplished so many things, so my ego gets in the way and so on. But when you're steadfast and you never have thoughts that separate yourself from others, and when you never exclude anyone, and when you are no longer having thoughts of harm of any kind, and that means thoughts of judgment directed towards yourself or others, then all living creatures, and that's why St. Francis, for example, would have living creatures would no longer feel anger or hatred in his presence.
Can you one day get to the level where you don't fluctuate any longer?
Even the least among you can do all that I have done, and even greater things. I mean, that's just right out of the scriptures that all of us have within us, because there's not a human being on this planet who isn't connected to Source.
The fact that, when you go to bed tonight and you look at your fingernails, you know that tomorrow morning they're going to be just a little bit longer than they were the night before. But you don't go to bed and say, I got to really work on these fingernails. I got to grow them tonight. And I got to beat my heart, and I got to grow my hair, and I've got to digest my food. There's a force. There's a source in the universe that is doing all of this for you. And all of us came from that source. And then we forgot. We forgot, and we took on these egos, and these egos say that who I am is what I have and what I do and what other people think of me, and who I am is separate and better than other people and separate from God. All you have to do, you see, Course in Miracles puts it this way. It says that being spiritual is not about learning new things. It's about remembering. So it goes like this. The memory of God comes to the quiet mind. It cannot come where there is conflict. A mind at war with itself remembers not eternal gentleness. What you remember is who you are, for you must be as God created you. And then it says, be done with this madness and return to the quiet remembrance of God. It's just about remembering. It's about going back to where you came from, living from that perspective, imagining what that source is like, seeing it as a vibration and energy, and reaching for thoughts that vibrate more in harmony with that energy. That's all it takes.
And then it's necessary to begin to look at how you can unbond yourself from your past wounds. The inclination to bond to our wounds rather than move past them traps us in a constant state of feeling unworthy. A person who has experienced traumatic events in life, such as incest or abuse or sexual molestation or the death of loved ones or traumatic illnesses or accidents or family disruptions or drug addictions, can become bonded to them and replay them for attention or pity. Very often the tale of these woes is told with a sort of urgency for the listener to know how horrible the wounding was and still is. The ego uses this energy as a power play in individual and group situations to encourage discussion of one's struggle to survive the wounding. This can keep individuals from advancing spiritually and reinforce the image of themselves as unfortunate. The tendency to bond with the wounds of our lives reminds us of how unworthy we are of receiving anything that we really would like because we remain in a state of suffering. The more these painful stories are recalled and repeated, the more we are guaranteed of not attracting our desires. Notice your body when it is wounded. An open wound actually closes up quite quickly. Just imagine what it would be like if that wound remained open for a long time. It would become infected and ultimately would kill the entire organism. The closing up of a wound and allowing it to heal can work the same way in your inner world of thoughts. When you go backward and continuously relive your pain, including labeling yourself incest survivor, alcoholic, sexual abuse survivor, you do so because of your inner experiences of bitterness. This harvest of bitterness keeps you from feeling worthy. So don't lead with your injuries. Deal with them and ask family and friends to be compassionate while you are grieving or recuperating. Then ask them to kindly remind you when it has taken on the form of a predictable response. The way out of bonding to your wounds is through forgiveness. Forgiveness is the most powerful thing you can do for your physiology and your spirituality. Forgiveness means that you fill yourself with love and you radiate that love outward and refuse to hang on to the venom or hatred that was engendered by the behaviors that caused the wounds in the first place. Forgiveness is a spiritual act of love for yourself, and it sends a message to everyone, including yourself, that you are an object of love, and that is what you are going to impart. Feeling worthy is essential to being able to attract to yourself what you desire. It is simply a matter of common sense. If you don't feel that you deserve something, why would the divine energy that is in all things send it your way? Let's look at a plan for adopting and honoring your worthiness to receive and attract from the divine source. The word inspiration literally means to be infused with spirit. In spirit, if you will. Practice doing what you love and loving what you do each day. This puts you in spirit and literally provides you with the enthusiasm for being a worthy recipient of God's grace. The word enthusiasm comes from the Greek root entheos, to be filled with God. Then make every effort to remove internal habits of pessimism, negativity, judgment, complaints, gossip, cynicism, resentment, and fault-finding from your vocabulary and your inner dialogue. Replace them with optimism, love, acceptance, kindness, and peace as your way of processing your world and the people in it. Then give yourself quiet time each day to erase feelings of unworthiness. And also read spiritual literature and poetry and listen to soothing classical music whenever possible. I have found that simply reading the poetry of Walt Whitman or Rabindranath Tagore or Rumi puts everything into a more sacred perspective for me. This beautiful poem from Khalil Gibran's The Prophet is an example of such literature. Pay particular attention to the words, "Your hearts know in silence the secrets of the days and nights," and "For the soul walks upon all paths." Here's Khalil Gibran on self-knowledge. And a man said, "Speak to us on self-knowledge." And he answered, saying, "Your hearts know in silence the secrets of the days and nights, but your ears thirst for the sound of your heart's knowledge. You would know in words that which you would have always known in thought. You would touch with your fingers the naked body of your dreams. And it is well you should. The hidden wellspring of your soul must needs rise and run murmuring to the sea, and the treasure of your infinite depths would be revealed to your eyes, but let there be no scales to weigh your unknown treasure, and seek not the depths of your knowledge with staff or sounding line, for self is a sea boundless and measureless. Say not, I have found the truth, but rather, I have found a truth. Say not, I have found the path of the soul. Say rather, I have met the soul walking upon my path. For the soul walks upon all paths. The soul walks not upon a line, neither does it grow like a reed. The soul unfolds itself like a lotus of countless petals. Allow yourself to be surrounded by things of beauty as much as possible. Each evening I leave my typewriter and I go out to the beach and I experience the magnificence of the sun setting over the Gulf of Mexico. To be a part of this sunset fills me with a sense of home beyond this planet and opens me up to the deeper nature within myself. I could never feel unworthy of the grace and munificence of the universe when I'm immersed in such beauty. Virtually any experience of beauty has a tendency to remove doubt about your own divinity and connection to the ultimate truth that is in everything and everyone. And then practice kindness toward yourself and others as frequently as possible. Give up your need to be right and to win in favor of being kind, and you will soon know the bliss of inner peace. Remember, your highest self only wants peace. When you are practicing kindness, peace shows up right on schedule. When you are at peace with yourself and your world, you know that you are a worthy recipient of all that comes your way. Make it your own special mission to be kind to others each day at least once, and to extend the same privilege to yourself as much as possible. Also, begin to process the universe as a friendly rather than an unfriendly place. Place all of your wounds from the earlier stages of your life into the category lessons for life. Remember, for every act of evil, there are a million acts of kindness. This universe runs on the energy of harmony and balance. Breathe in that energy and breathe out the ideas of your being life's victim. And finally, say it over and over until it registers. I am what I am, and I am worthy of the abundance that is the universe and all that is in it, including me. I think the first thing that you'll see a dramatic change in is the amount of time that you have left over when you give up all of the negative kind of emotions. How much more fulfilling and gratifying your life becomes. We'll start with your own physical health. 10 years ago, I weighed 30 pounds more than I do now. I wasn't exercising. I was not watching my nutrition. I was a candidate for a heart attack. I was not practicing good physical health principles. Now, I never really made a conscious decision to say, all right, I'm going on a diet. All right, I'm going to start exercising. I'm going to watch the sugar, and I'm going to get the salt out of my diet. And I'm not going to have caffeine in my diet, and I'm not going to have poisons in my system. I never did that. Those become natural outgrowths of self-love, the non-self-serving kind of self-love, the kind of self-love that is like having a quiet love affair with yourself, where you don't have to tell anybody. It's not necessary. It's just a given. It just is. You begin to see dramatic changes. I started running 10 years ago, and once I got myself into shape, I ran a minimum of 8 miles every day. And I got into a streak, and it's almost 9 years now of continuous, every day, never missing a day of running. And at this point, exercising and being trim is just what I am. I am trimness. I'm not trying to get there. And these changes that take place are so dramatically wonderful. I mean, I can give you some specific things in my life that I do now that 5 years ago, I would have thought you were crazy. I won't drive to the store. Not because I want to save gas or because I don't like driving. I love driving. I have a beautiful car and all that. I don't even think about it. I walk to the store. I walk almost everywhere I go. It has become a lifestyle with me. It seems so silly to me to fire up 4,000 pounds of steel to go get a 39-cent loaf of bread or whatever it is, when it's so wonderful to walk. or to jog down there. And so I find myself, in addition to my running, walking 4 or 5 miles in a day, using that time creatively. All right, I walk where I used to run, or where I used to drive. When I'm in a restaurant, I used to always put salt on everything before I even tasted it. I just put a lot of salt on, a lot of it. I don't even ask if there's salt on the table anymore. And I never made a decision not to do it. It just doesn't feel right in my body. Now I consume 1/4 of the amount of food that I used to, and I have 4 times as much energy. I sleep much less than I used to, and I haven't consciously made any decision other than to use love as the principle for making my life work. All right? So when you ask about the benefits in the physiological area are astounding, and they just seem to get a hold of you, and you begin to make intelligent choices or healthy choices that are good for the organism. They come about naturally when you start operating your life on this inner kind of glow that I'm talking about, this serenity. You see, I think that there's more to the universe than what the pragmatists would have us believe. I am open to everything being possible and operate from the premise that nobody knows enough to be a pessimist. All right? None of us know enough. We know so little about the universe. I mean, I laugh in the newspapers. Just last week I saw a story about the quasars. You know, these stars that are out at the edge of the universe. And I said, what is this edge of the universe? I mean, what's there at this edge? Is there a wall there? Or is there a cliff? I mean, what is it? And how did it get there? And what's on the other side? We can't comprehend within ourselves something that has no beginning and no end, because all the things that we are limited to in this space that we occupy now start with beginnings and ends. Everything has a cause and an effect. Try to contemplate for a moment a world which has no cause and effect, in which everything just is, just the way it is. And one thing doesn't cause the other. It is, and it always has been. Try to think of eternity, when we talk about an eternity, as something that we can't comprehend because we're confined in the body that we occupy to only think in terms of when we began and when we end. Look at your body right now, and look at your fingers, and look at your arms and all that, and remind yourself that who you are is not those things. That those fingers were very different when you were a month old. You still were. You still existed. You are not your fingers, or your bones, or your nose, or your ears, or your hair, or any of those things. Those things have all undergone dramatic shifts in your lifetime, however old you are, and yet your essence, whoever you are, continues. It goes on, and it continues to occupy many, many different bodies. This is not a case for reincarnation. It's not a case for anything. It is looking at the world from a perspective of awe and magnificence and openness to everything being possible. And that whatever it is that you call mysticism or metaphysics or whatever is nothing more than just the things that we have been limited to because we only understand what we're confined to. We can have anything for ourselves when we're open to that. And that love principle that I talked about earlier, from one cell to the next, is what many scientists are beginning to speculate on as the source of energy that makes us all work. All right? And when we operate on that principle, as you look through all of the great teachings there have ever been, that one principle of self-acceptance, self-love, taking good care of yourself, all seems to permeate all of the teachings. That just seems to go back. That can't be an accident. There's got to be some truth to that.
We think that if we don't accomplish something, that we're not valuable. We don't stop and say that who I am is valuable because I exist. And that's all I need to know that I'm worthy. That my worth doesn't come from how well I do, but we send our kids off to school and we teach them, don't we? I'd never ask my kids for their report card. It's just never been a big deal to me whatsoever. And I've often told the story so many times of when I was living in the orphanage in Mount Clemens, and I came home from school, and I asked Mrs. Scarf, the lady that we lived with, what's a scurvy elephant? And she said, where did you hear that? I said, well, I heard Mrs. Poole, my third grade teacher, telling the principal that Wayne Dyer was in her classroom and that he was a scurvy elephant. And so she said, no, I've never heard of that. She got on the telephone and called the principal. The principal said, oh, that's Wayne. He gets everything mixed up. She didn't say that he was a scurvy elephant in her classroom. She said that he was a disturbing element. in her classroom. And my great teacher, one of the great teachers of my life, Abraham Maslow, used to say that if you really want to reach self-actualization, you have to learn, first and foremost, to become independent of the good opinion of other people. To become independent of it, and not run your life on the basis of what other people have told you that you should be doing. E. E. Cummings, the great American poet with all lowercase letters, remember? To be nobody but yourself in a world which is doing its best night and day to make you just like everybody else means to fight the greatest battle there is to fight and never stop fighting. I don't use the word fighting, but I suggest to you that, and I wrote this out in here, ego training continues into adulthood, often eradicating any self-concept based on our divinity as a piece of God who came from non-doing and is headed back to non-doing. Ego training contributes to a self-concept that makes us shrivel into a feeling of insignificance at our meager portfolio in contrast to those who've achieved more. The truth is, we don't have to do a thing in order to validate ourselves as worthy and valuable. Had we done nothing but just be godlike, we'd fulfill our own dharma. Ironically, we'd most likely have created a larger and even more impressive resume had you allowed yourself to just be. You are not a human doing, you are a human being. And being means not identifying yourself on the basis of what you do or what you accomplish. The great irony of what I'm speaking about here is that when you get to this place that I'm speaking about, this place of non-doing, which most of our egos can hardly even comprehend because we've been so saturated with the belief system that if you don't do and accomplish and accumulate, then you're not valuable. So it's hard for us to imagine, how do you do without struggling, without striving, without working so hard? But just ask any great artist how they do it. You know, Picasso said that when I enter my studio to paint, he said, I leave my body at the door before I enter, the way the Muslims leave their shoes when they enter the mosque. And I just allow my spirit to be there. This talk that I'm giving to you right now is a non-doing talk. I don't know what I'm going to be saying 5 minutes from now or 3 hours from now, any more than the ball that you throw in the air has any idea of where it's headed. It just is. And that place is not a place of irresponsibility and not being respectable. Ironically, it's a place of great accomplishment. My most joyous moments in writing are when I'm not struggling, when I'm not trying, when I've let go. In the recovery movement, every one of you know what we say, don't you? Let go and what? Let God. Just allow the highest part of you to take over and become at peace with that. So it's like, have I lost ambition? No, I haven't lost ambition. I've lost attachment to the ego identification of what ambition is. I've lost that completely. So you don't get lazy. In fact, you get more active. You get busier, than your resume gets bigger. You know, your list of accomplishments grows and grows and grows. But you're not attached to it any longer. You just, it's like there's no hanging on to it. There's no need for it. It's not. So you're living in process rather than outcome. You know, outcome is when you're doing what you're doing so that you'll get the accolades or the money or the rewards of some kind or the Emmy or whatever it is. You know, you get that. Whereas, you know, the great actors,
they're not thinking about getting an Academy Award while they're doing the acting any more than Michael Jordan is thinking about, getting above the rim when he's out there playing. He's just in the moment, and perfected the business of being in the moment, and not attached to any of the stuff. And when you ask him how he does what he does, he says, I haven't got an idea. I have no idea. Which is, when people ask me, how do I get in front of an audience and speak to an audience and keep them entertained and live, I don't know how to teach that. I can't teach that, any more than you can teach filmmaking. So a lot of people want to know about making the complete shift into meaning. A lot of it is about attachment and detaching yourself from the things that you used to think you absolutely had to have, and that the more you detach yourself, there's an old story told of two kittens, or a kitten and an old cat in the alley. Have you heard that story? And the kitten is in the alley, and he's chasing his tail, like you see kittens do, chasing and chasing and chasing and chasing. And the old cat looks at him and says, what are you doing? And he said, well, I'm chasing after my tail. He said, well, why would you do that? He said, well, I just returned from cat philosophy school, and in cat philosophy school we learned that there are two things that are important for a cat. One is that happiness is the most important thing for a cat. And two, that happiness is located in my tail. So what I've discovered and decided to do is that I'm going to chase after it. And once I get a hold of it and get a grip on it, I'll have a lock on eternal happiness. And the old alley cat looks at him and says, I really haven't had a chance to go to philosophy school like you did. I've lived in the alleys most of my life. He said, but it's amazing. I've discovered those same truths for me, that happiness is the most important thing in the world for a cat. And I've noticed that it is located in my tail. He said, the only difference, I think, between you and I is that I've noticed that when I do go about my business and do the things that are really important to me, it follows after me wherever I go. It chases after you wherever you go. And that's really a very hard message for those of us who grew up in the ego-dominated, I have to get more, I have to get ahead of other people, I evaluate myself on the basis of my achievements and so on, to believe that something could chase after you. And so the issue becomes, and I think this is a really significant part of this of moving into meaning in your life, is when is it most likely that one of these quantum shifts is going to take place? When are you going to get this otherworldly message, or when are you going to get the wake-up call, the internal wake-up call, however it manifests? How's that going to show up? These quantum shifts can take like many different forms. I've asked people in audiences to come forward and give me examples of quantum moments, in your life. And they range. I mean, they range from, I just had an insight, it happened to me in a dream. I awoke from a dream and it was just so real and so clear that this was it was a synchronistic event. I mean, I was thinking about this and all of it, and somebody came on television and they started talking about it, and I exactly knew. Another one, I get it on my radio show all the time. They'll hear me talking to somebody on my radio show about this, and just listening to another person, hearing another person's story and all of it, it triggers that kind of a thing. But generally the transition is preceded by an awareness that I think everyone has. If you're really skillful at asking people about themselves, you can get it out of them that they know. They know that there's more to their life. They know that there is. I bet if I ask you about filmmaking and so on, you could probably go to something inside of you that maybe you were doing something else, delivering newspapers, who knows what the hell you were doing. And all of a sudden, it's like it began to hit. Maybe a film that you saw, maybe, something, whatever. And that's it. You're hooked, and you're moving in that direction, and meaning now becomes like the dynamic or drawing force in your life. So your ambition now becomes to fulfill your dharma, to fulfill your destiny. Quantum moments show up in different ways for virtually everyone. But what they usually signify, especially what I just described, that very vivid, surprising, kindly, benevolent, long-lasting kind of thing that takes place, is where a person is getting themselves, in the Tao they would call it, returning back to the Tao, returning to the place from which you came while you're here, living heaven on earth, within yourself. In fact, Leo Tolstoy wrote a book called "The Kingdom of Heaven is Within," about that concept, about having it within you. And I don't know if it's so much a letting go as it is a reconnection to what I call the field of intention, or the power of intention. I mean, intention, the book, The Power of Intention, is really not about the ego saying, I intend to make something happen, and that's therefore I'm going to do it. It has nothing to do with that. It's the opposite of that. The field of intention is really a field from which all things are intended. And all you have to do is reconnect yourself to that field, that creative field that intends everything into the world of the 10,000 things, into the world of the material world, and get yourself in harmony with that. And that's what I think happens in the meaning phase of our life, is that we reconnect to our source of being. Castaneda spoke about that there's a link between you and this field of intention, but for almost everybody, it's a rusty link. It's just it's not clean. It's just every once in a while we realize, oh my God, there is something bigger. There is something happening here. Oh wow, look at that. Oh, I met that person and that, and the right thing showed up, and I have a synchronistic. Carl Jung invented that term, synchronicity. I have like just sort of a collaboration with fate. It feels like, as if just everything just is working right, and the right people are showing up, and all of that. That stuff begins to really foment in your life, and you begin to see it taking place all over when you let go of the ego. Because the ego, according to most of the spiritual teachers, including Patanjali, is just called, it's the false self. This idea that you are what you have and what you do and what other people think of you, and that you're separate from everybody else and separate from God, that's just false. It's like, so you're living under, and that's why the Jung quote where he says that what was true in the morning will have at evening have become a lie, and you're literally living a lie, trying to fulfill a destiny that has been imposed upon you by all of these. By society and by the right people and so on. But in here, there's music that you came here to play, and you came here to play that music. Intention, the field of intention, is asking you to play that music, and to take the risks, and to do whatever it is that is required of you. And I'll be there to guide you and make it easy for you. It's not going to be a struggle. It's not going to be that difficult. You've just convinced yourself that this is that's what my next book is about looking at the thought systems that we have that keep us from changing long habituated thinking patterns. Why is a person overweight almost all of their life? It isn't because they were destined to be fat. They're thinking, in a different way. And the same with addictions. Or why do you keep attracting the same kind of people into your life? The wrong people for you, or whatever it might be. This is just all long habituated thought systems that if we challenge them and begin to see that they're not even true, they're all lies. So it's like we live in a world in which all things are possible, in which there's no accidents, there can be no accidents, there's an organizing intelligence that supports everything in this universe, and we live as if who we are is this little microscopic separate thing who's always got to do things a certain way and fit in a certain way, and none of that is true.